be a good best friend to yourself, because that's the one relationship that is going to stick with you for the rest of your life.
Welcome to Most Likely To, a podcast presented by Donors Choose. If you can see it, you can be it. Hi guys, our guest today goes by Mr. Donovan to his students, but his name is Donovan Taylor Hall. Some of you may have seen him on TikTok and the Today Show when his fun and warm teaching style went viral. Donovan encourages young people all over the country to build positive self-identity and has been called a modern-day Mr. Rogers. On today's episode, Donovan talks about his identity growing up as a biracial queer kid. He gives some tips on public speaking, and he gives you the scoop on why you should and why you should not become a teacher. On Most Likely To, it's Donovan Taylor Hall. This episode of Most Likely To is sponsored by KPMG. From watching you teach, it looks like you have just this fun and amazing energy. So I'm curious what your family and your childhood was like.
I think I leaned really deeply into humor when I was a kid, and understanding that humor made situations better. I realized that a lot of young people are bored throughout the day, and when you're bored, it's hard to learn. And so when I became a teacher, I just made it a point to have humor and fun be kind of core values of the classroom.
You eventually became a middle school teacher, and I'm wondering what middle school was like for you as a student.
Middle school was incredibly tough. It's really when I started to have a really negative relationship with myself. It's like really when I started to not like myself. It turned very deeply into like hating myself. And even though I had friends and was doing well in school, I still like that's what I think of in middle school, is really starting this process of like not wanting to be me.
When that happened, what did you do? Did you have anybody to turn to? Did you just go deeper into yourself? How did you cope with that?
I had people I could have talked to, but I had this belief. Something I talk to kids about a lot is something called self-limiting belief, which was like, I have to be good. My dad passed away when I was a kid, when I was 6 years old, and each one of my brothers in my family kind of handled it differently. And my way of handling it was really trying to be good. And so when I started to struggle, I didn't want to like burden my mom, and I wasn't super close with any of my teachers. And so instead of like asking for help or talking about it, I really just hid and got really good at hiding that. And it followed me, I mean, well into my adulthood.
I feel that a lot. I feel like when I had my own trauma growing up, that I just exterior wise wanted to always look like I was doing fine, and not just fine, but good, so that my parents
Mhm.
and whoever didn't worry about me. And you just end up using that as a survival tactic of some sort,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, working with like kids, I hear that so much from them. And I think that sometimes outward behaviors, when I'm working with young people, I can see them really struggling to kind of show everyone that I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, because that's what's expected of them. But then when there's moments when they're not okay, they don't have the capacity to ask for help. And that's a lot of what I support young people with, which is like, part of growing up is having tough periods, and learning how to lean on people and access support, and what resources are available to you.
On our podcast, we like to talk about identity. So I'd love to hear, how do you identify, and how did your identity shape your experience growing up?
So a lot of aspects of my identity, I feel like don't fit within one kind of neat box. And so one aspect of that is being biracial. So I am a part German as well, but when I was younger, because I grew up in a predominantly white area, I really like latched on to that piece of me to show them that I was similar, because I didn't want to be left out. And I think that caused a lot of that disconnect from myself. Was like, when you don't like a part of who you are, a part of your identity, then it gets really difficult to like have a good relationship with yourself. It kind of felt like I was like a little bit of poison. And then the same thing with my orientation. So I identify as queer, but I came out in high school just as gay. And that's because in that time, those things didn't really, it was just like gay or straight, especially if you're a man. But then as I got older, I started to explore and realize that there's more to my identity, and there's pieces of me that I had kind of shoved down to fit in. And a lot of it, this is what I tell kids too, is a lot of it is just trying to protect yourself. I was just at a school where there was like 4 Black kids, and one of the kids asked me if I ever felt like I sold myself out for having to code switch or having to act a certain way. And I told him, like, no matter what, you were Black, and even though I'm biracial, I present as a Black man. And I understand the importance of being a Black man in the education system, talking about mental health, talking about emotion. Even though I hold both of those identity pieces really close to my heart, I think that it's still been a struggle to figure out how to kind of say it. But I think it's easy to put ourselves in boxes and then to feel safe. And when someone challenges those boxes, we push back. Whether we're doing it on purpose or not, that's not for me to decide, but that's what I
Mm.
experienced a lot.
And I think that feeling of being an outsider is a feeling that a lot of us can relate to. It seems to me, just from observing you and getting to know you, that you, throughout your career and through growing up, have kind of brought your whole self to the forefront. How did you go about doing that? Was there a turning point or something that really brought you out of the shadows, out into the world as this is me, biracial me, queer me?
Yeah. Spaces. I grew up in Virginia, in an area that was like pretty much half Black, half white, with a little space for anyone else in between. But when I was in my 20s, I moved to Oakland,
Mm,
California, and it was just so
mm.
different. It was like I grew my hair out for the first time, which is like a big part of me now, and I got to be in queer spaces. And then I realized how different everyone was, but at the same time, like how similar people were. And so I think that gave me a lot of confidence to really own those parts of myself. Another thing I work with kids on too is like kind of naming and identifying things, so we can really unpack and process them. Because if we don't, then they can kind of be this like sneaky thing that's, like I said, that poison earlier. It's like there's something they haven't figured out about themselves, whether it's how they show up in the world, whether it's a piece of their identity, whether it's like some of their strengths that are almost being used against them. And I think that's why representation is super important,
Mm,
to kind of be able to say, like, here's what it looks like.
absolutely. Being a teacher today is very challenging. And I read that you wrote a Medium post, a Medium article called "I Don't Want to Be a Teacher, but I Love Teaching." And so let's get real here for a moment. Can you tell us some of the reasons not to become a teacher in today's world?
I think the lack of support is really crucial for teachers, and so that support specifically looks like dealing with classroom behaviors. And you have some teachers who are experiencing physical harm in their classroom. I can't imagine how awful that must feel to dedicate so much of yourself to these young people and then to feel so undervalued. And I think that when schools don't have the resources to really help meet the basic needs of teachers, and then are putting more and more work on them, I think it's very unfair. And then I'm seeing a lot of it being turned around on teachers.
Why should folks consider teaching as a profession? And if you could fill in the blank.
I think you should become a teacher if you care about helping young people. I think you should become a teacher if you like to see people grow and learn. If you have a foundation of care for young people, then you are desperately needed in the classroom. Passion and engagement and care create such a wonderful learning experience for young people. A lot of times when you have people in their, when they're older, talk about what they remember, that's what they remember is the teachers. They remember how teachers made them feel. They remember how learning felt in that classroom. I think right now, if you are someone that cares, and wants to help and wants to support, and is concerned about where society is headed, that's the place we need to be,
Mhm.
is in there with young people, helping them learn and helping them grow.
Can you tell us a story about a young person who you've taught, who you saw sort of a transformation over time?
A lot. A lot. I'll talk about Katniss. I'll use her code name. I met her when she was in 7th grade. She's currently a freshman in college. And I was able to, through connecting with her family, continue to support her even after I stopped teaching. When I met her, I just saw like untrained strength, and it was coming out in all of these like really intense ways. And I mean, she was like a leader even though she didn't want to be, and if she was mad about something, she was going to let everybody know, but it always came from this place of like injustice. That's what made her really mad, was like seeing boys taunting
Mm.
girls. She's like the first person to step up. But then I also saw how incredibly tough she was on herself. She was so critical of herself. And a lot of the work I did with her ended up just being a practice space. It wasn't me saying, like, this is how you need to be, this is how you should be. It was just talking about, like, I hear what you said. I'm going to like mirror it back to you and think about a different way of looking at this. And she took all of those lessons and she learned how to cultivate her leadership so where she could step into it when she chooses it. It wasn't something that was just placed on
Mm.
her. Like, I think one of my favorite conversations with her was, she said, like, people told me I'm a leader and I didn't choose that. And I said, well, you're not a leader because you're not in a leading capacity. I was like, but you show leadership through these actions. And so when I started to pinpoint those actions for her, she started to realize how she was showing it versus like feeling the pressure of, I have to be the
Mm.
leader. And that gave her the choice to step up and step back when she needed to, when she felt like, yeah, something's wrong here, I want to say something, or like, this isn't my battle, I don't need to be the person that fixes this. But the hugest transformation is just, when I talk with her now, I don't even have to like Mr. Donovan her. She'll be talking and then she'll say, well, I did this thing, but I've been working on forgiving myself and I like held myself accountable. And I'm like, I'm trying to be nice to myself. It's hard, but I'm still working on it. And I'm working on my self talk. And I'm just sitting here with like stars in my eyes, because that's the whole point, is like, it's not to be like this person's guru or to be this person's expert forever. Is like, we get young people for a short amount of time, and all we can do is like hopefully be a good influence on
Mhm.
them.
I just love how it's so clear that you've empowered her with these tools that she can continue using day after day with or without you. Um,
Yeah.
Going back to the career questions, how do you recommend that students discover their strengths, um, or challenges, and what career paths they should take that might be connected to those areas?
I think, first of all, I think a huge part of strengths is that a lot of us don't know the names. We don't know how to label
Mm.
them. And so things like that we may be good at, until we can say that this is a strength, this is what it means, this is how it shows up for me. A lot of times we don't understand what that looks like. I like to focus on character strengths a lot, because character strengths are accessible to everybody. No matter where you're at on the academic scale, like, your character is something that you control, and it's something that you can actively like use to impact other people. So I do a 3-step strength inquiry with kids. And if you're a young person and you're trying to figure out like what you're good at, I would really deeply suggest that you do this, which is, first, name your strengths. So really think about, what do you do that you feel good at? What do you do that has like a feeling of flow, meaning like, I can just get into this and I love it and time is passing. Like, what do you do that has an impact on people? What do you do that has an impact on you that you do well? So those could be things like organization, it could be things like empathy, it could be things like leadership or kindness or caring. Then I have them ask people in their life that they're close with, to say, and even show like if they need help, because a lot of people don't know how to name the strengths, if they want to see the 24 character strengths. And then once you have all three of those results, like, it's not like, I'm gonna age myself. It's not like Divergent, where it's just like, this is who I am, like I have to be this way. But you can look at all three of those lists and you can make your own list based off of that,
Mhm.
and say, like, because especially when you're getting feedback from other people, you may not see that as a strength in you, but that might be something valuable or something that you want to build up. So it might say, I take 2 from my original list, name them. I took 1 from like what my mom told me, because that's a good one I didn't realize. I took 2 from the
Mm.
survey, and these are my top 5 strengths. And then just doing research into it. When it comes to careers, telling kids, this is very controversial. So I like,
We like
just
it.
hear me
Let's
out.
hear it.
Okay, just hear me out. Just hear me out. I think the idea of telling kids that they can do anything they want in the world, or they can be anything that they want in the world, is not as helpful as we think
Mhm.
it is. I like the idea behind it, because what we're trying to do is prevent kids from having limiting beliefs,
Mhm.
but also, one, it's overwhelming, right? It's like, I'm trying to figure out a career for me, and someone says, you can do
Mhm.
anything. And it's like, great, right? Now I don't know where to even start. And two, there are
Mhm.
limitations. There are limitations to careers that we may not have the ability to do. And that is a tough pill to swallow. And so if you've been told your whole life, I can be anything, I can do anything, and then you reach these real limitations that don't allow you to pursue that dream, it can feel like everything is shutting down,
Mhm.
or like what am I going to do now? If you understand your strengths, if you understand what you enjoy doing, if you understand what you think is important in life, you can start to search for careers that all of those things are present in, or careers that will allow you to really focus on some of your strengths or something that you really enjoy doing. And that gives such a higher level of like life satisfaction when you're doing things that are connected to your values and your strengths, when you get to do something that you're good at. And I think that's kind of how I found this career for myself, because I used to be, when I first started work, I was a knife salesman. I was good at it. And they were like, you've got all this potential, you can do this and blah, blah, blah. But I just didn't care about
Mhm.
knives. And then I think caring is a big part of my core values. And so then when I was going to friends and family, trying to sell them these like $1,200 knife sets, it just felt like icky. And then when I found teaching, I was like, wow, this involves a lot of things I'm passionate about. It also involves some of my strengths, and it also involves some of my values. But then I realized that there was other opportunities that really matched all of
Mhm.
these things, where I could bring all of these things into it. And if you are a young person, this is one thing that I would highly suggest, is become an expert in you. Figure out what you are good at, figure out what you're willing to get good at, like what helps you grow, what motivates you, what kind of people you want to be around, how you want to feel. Like the more that you can build expertise in yourself, the more that you can find opportunities that really complement those things. And that's something I was never told as a young person. No one told me you should be a speaker.
You just came off of a speaking tour with, I think you said, 27 keynote speeches in the last 4 months. What is your number one tip for students on how to become a great public speaker?
Find something that you are passionate to talk about. That's the biggest
Mm.
thing. Another warning, but the first time I ever spoke was at one of my really good friends' funeral when I was 17. That's when I realized I loved storytelling. And the reason that I found that out is because I was going to his house and I was telling stories about him to people. And then his parents said, like, could you tell these stories at the funeral? And I was like, yeah, of course I would do that. And I got on stage and it was so easy to do because I was so passionate about sharing these stories with
Mm.
people. And when you're passionate and you have expertise in yourself or whatever you're talking about, I think that what people really get afraid of like, saying or messing up or forgetting where I'm at, people don't really care about those things as much as people think. When you're up there talking about something that you care about, especially in a professional sense, people will listen, and people will be engaged. And you can always work on specific skills like um, pacing or connecting the dots or crowd engagement. But I think the core of it, just like I said with kids, is like you got to care about what you're talking about.
I love that. We're going to shift to a lightning round, and I'm just going to say a phrase, and you'll just tell me the first thing that pops to mind. So,
Okay.
your hype song.
My hype song is Huddle Formation by the Go Team.
Uh,
But that's my go-to if I'm sad, if I'm happy, if I need to hype myself up, like that's my
Okay,
go-to every
I'm
time.
looking it up after this. Favorite video game?
Fortnite with middle schoolers is so much fun. But if I had to pick one on my own, it would be Final Fantasy X.
Favorite way to de-stress?
Kayaking.
Kayaking. Oh, wow.
Oh, it is my happy space. It is the best I feel. I love
I did
kayaking.
not expect that answer. That is
I don't
wow.
know.
Favorite
It just came out of nowhere.
favorite mantra?
Take it easy, but take it is
Ah,
one I learned.
your go-to breakfast order.
Alvarez Authentic Latin Food number 2 in Tampa, Florida. It's right down the street from me. They've got a $5 breakfast burrito with this green sauce that is the best thing that I've ever had, and I will eat 16 of them in 1 week.
I love me a green sauce, honestly. Favorite Twitch, Instagram, or TikTok creator?
Miss Katie sings. She does social emotional music for little kids. It's like so next level like what she talks to kids about, what she has kids reflect on, what she sings about.
My name is William Presley, and I'm a student at PS 3071K. What advice would you give to a teenager who feels invisible?
First of all, like, I'm sorry that you feel that way. I think that's the biggest thing that needs to be said. And if I was there with them, I would tell them that I see them. I think just honoring that that's how people feel is really important. And then for people who do want to go a step further, after acknowledging it, I would say to you, see yourself. Is every, and it's hard, but see yourself. And that doesn't just mean like you have to feel positive, but see yourself and be there for yourself when things feel hard, when you feel lonely. Like, be a good best friend to yourself, because that's the one relationship that is going to stick with you for the rest of your life. And so the more that you can see yourself and appreciate yourself and learn about yourself, the easier it will be to attract the people who can see and appreciate those things as well. And so it's not a overnight kind of fix, but to really be there for yourself in those moments.
What are one or two things that you've noticed your students struggling with the most in the past few years? And what's one tool that they can use to work through these experiences?
The one thing that keeps coming up is like how tough kids are on themselves, and whether that's like being tough on themselves about being perfect or making good grades, or being tough on themselves because they don't fit in or they're not meeting people's standards. One thing I've noticed with society in general is that it's not okay. It feels like it's not okay to make mistakes or to be a learner or to grow. But that's a huge part of life, is learning and growing. And so when I work with young people, I started talking to them about this skill because I was just concerned. I was so worried about how tough these young people were on themselves. So I talk a lot about self compassion being a skill, recognizing and forgiving yourself, allowing yourself to give yourself grace, like when you're tired, to take care of yourself, to ask for help when you need it, to advocate for yourself, to forgive yourself, hold yourself accountable, learn from mistakes, and then also learn how to forgive yourself. Like, if you're going through a tough time, don't make it tougher by being a bully to yourself. And self-compassion is difficult, but just like riding a bike or playing a video game or learning an academic skill, it takes time and practice and effort. And there's like a little cool loop with self-compassion too, because every time you make a mistake or you have a moment and maybe you're being tough on yourself, it can turn into this like cycle of like, I should have been compassionate. What's wrong with me? And it's like, nope, that's just another opportunity right there
Mm.
to check in with yourself and say, I know I'm being hard on myself. I'm working on this. Like, I'm trying to do
What are
better.
one or two specific like tactics that you use to show self-love, or to that we can do to show self-love?
Learning to forgive yourself. I think accountability and self forgiveness are really important. I say accountability because if you do bad things or you harm other people and then you just immediately say, I forgive myself, it's feeling like we're missing an opportunity. But to really, like, if you make a mistake, to own up to it, to ask for help, or to realize like, I should have done this differently, or what can I do differently next time, forgive yourself and then move forward. But those are things that I, even as an adult, still struggle with, is learning how to be compassionate with myself. But I have to check my self talk a lot. I have to check my expectations of myself as well, to make sure that I'm creating realistic and fair expectations for me.
Okay, this is my last question for you. As you probably know, this podcast was created by our team at Donors Choose. And at Donors Choose, we have a huge reach into schools across the country. So if you could just say one thing to every middle, high school student, et cetera, in America, what would it be?
I use this quote a lot. Uh, it kind of embodies youth empowerment and youth mental health, which is, take care of yourself if you're struggling and get care for yourself if you're suffering. Life is tough. Struggle is difficult, but struggle helps us grow. It's moving us towards a goal. Suffering doesn't have a goal. And a lot of times when we don't take care of ourselves when we're struggling, when things are difficult, it can turn into what feels like suffering. And I think of it like the difference between climbing a mountain and someone drowning in a lake. Like if you're climbing a mountain, you have a goal. You are like working towards something. It's going to be hard. You might need to take breaks. You might need to ask for help. You might mess up a couple of times. It's going to take a toll on you physically and emotionally, but you're working towards a goal. Like if you are suffering and you're in the lake drowning, you're just trying to survive. And we wouldn't tell someone drowning to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. We wouldn't say, try your best, right? We would help them. And so I think sometimes we think self care, but we also need community care. I also recognize, with that being said, that there are not a lot of resources in every area that are open for young people to get the support that they need. Start the practice of asking for support and saying, I'm in a tough place. I don't know what to do. Please help me. Take care of yourself when you're struggling. Get care for yourself if you're suffering.
That was teacher and mental health advocate Donovan Hall. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Make sure to click the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss a new episode. We are at donorschoose.org/podcast. Tag us in your posts about the show. This show is about exploring the journeys of the people you care about. So let us know who you're interested in hearing from by sending in your requests at podcast@donorschoose.org or DM us on Instagram.